I gave you some constraints in the second scenario. A couple of kids walking through the woods, find an old abandoned house. Constraints help us with our creativity. We have a misconception that creative thinking is thinking outside of the box. But in truth, creative thinking is understanding the box that we're in and then leveraging that box to generate ideas. Let's talk a little bit more about two of those most important things. The first one being the challenge. If we understand and structure the challenge that we have in the proper way, it can really help us generate more ideas. There are a couple specific things we need to know about every challenge. One is the challenge needs to be legitimate. The challenge needs to be solved. Has anybody ever sat in a brainstorming meeting at work, maybe in a previous life if you were in corporate America, and you didn't really care about, or you knew that even if we solve this problem, it really doesn't matter? Is that one of those? And you don't really care about getting good ideas for the problem because the problem isn't legitimate. The problem must be solved. The second thing is the problem needs to come from authority. If the junior intern says, hey, let's solve this problem, that carries a lot of different weight than if the CIO, the COO, the CEO says, hey, let's solve this problem, right? If the CEO says, let's solve this problem, you're more likely to come up with good ideas. The third thing is that you have to have a personal connection to the problem that needs to be solved. It may not affect you directly personally, but you need to have some kind of a personal connection to it. And then we're going to structure our challenge statement in a couple ways. The first one is, and if you flip to the worksheet side of the sheet that I gave you, we're going to structure it starting with these words. In what ways might we? What that's going to do is help us remember that we're trying to generate lots of ideas. We're trying to generate a multitude of ideas. The more ideas we get, the better ideas that we're going to have. In what ways might we? Then the other thing is your challenge inherently is going to have some level of specificity. If we are going to come up with a challenge, I'll give you just a really easy example. I may say, my challenge is to save on copying costs. Well, I can get more specific with that and say, I want to save on toner cost. That's more specific, right? Or I can get less specific and say, I want to save on communication costs. And each of those different levels of specificity will give you different ideas. So when I do my full trainings, I teach everybody, once you structure your challenge, a great way to come up with different ideas is to change the level of specificity. I worked with a group. They asked me, in what ways can we throw a birthday party? We changed the level of specificity and we said, in what ways can we celebrate a birthday? You get different ideas from those different challenges, right? Just by changing your level of specificity, you get different ideas. The second thing is that you're going to have constraints in every single challenge. You do not have an unlimited amount of everything. Time, money, people, whatever. There's three different kinds of constraints. The first kind of constraint is the constraint of what we call resource. The most common kind of resource constraint is money. We don't have an unlimited budget to do everything, but we may have other resource constraints such as skills or knowledge that we may need, amount of people that we have. Those are resource constraints. There are constraints of time. Taxes are due by April 15th. There's a time constraint. That's a deadline. There could be a time constraint for elapsed time. We only want to spend an hour or a week doing something. So there's constraints of time. And then the last thing is there's going to be constraints of method. The way in which we must do something, like maybe if we're in corporate America, Sarbanes-Oxley applies. If we're in medical, HIPAA. You may have company policies that make you do things a certain way, so there's constraints of method. Once we know the constraints, we can use the constraints to get different ideas. Let me give you an example. That same group I worked with, the birthday party, what ways can we throw a birthday party or celebrate a birthday? They said we have a money constraint, $100. We reversed that, so we came up with some ideas. How can we celebrate a birthday for less than $100? They had some pretty good ideas. I said, let's reverse the constraint. Instead of spending $100, why don't we make $100? Anybody get any different ideas by just saying what ways might we celebrate a birthday and make $100, right? Well, they ended up coming with an idea where they had a fundraiser And they gave all the money from the fundraiser while they were celebrating their birthday to the church youth group. And so just that reversal of the constraint gave them different ideas. You may have a challenge like, I have to sell this house and nobody's coming to look at it. How can I promote this house? In what ways might I promote this house? And I only can spend $250 and I need to have this house sold in 30 days. Maybe we can reverse or change the constraints. Maybe I only need to spend $2.50. Maybe I need to make $250. And that might spark different ideas in your brain. The whole thing about brainstorming and creativity is go with a list of a lot of ideas and then picking from those ideas. Change your level of abstraction. Change the amount of specificity in your challenge. Get different ideas. Write them all out. Change it again. Get different ideas. Write them all out. Look at your constraints. Look at your time constraints, your money, your resource constraints, your method constraints. List them all out. And then play with the constraints. I teach a tool called SCAMPER, which is an acronym. It means substitute, combine, adapt, maximize or minimize, eliminate or reverse. That's where I got the reverse about the $100 from that tool. I called that a constraint buster. Substitute one constraint for another. Minimize the constraints. Instead of $250, it's $2.50. Maximize the constraint. Instead of $250, it's $250,000. Not that you can spend more than $250, but maybe you get different ideas. And the idea is to get a lot of ideas that we can choose from whenever we need to do any kind of creative thinking. So, in summary, use the worksheet to understand your challenge. Make sure that it's legitimate. It comes with authority. It's personal. Has a good level of specificity. It starts with those words. In what ways might we? Understand your constraints of method, time, and resource. And utilize those things to generate new ideas in whatever business, whatever personal life that you're doing. If you go to ideas.coach, which is my website, I have a couple more videos which go into this in a lot more depth. This is a very short talk. I give much deeper, longer talks and workshops about this, obviously. But go there. There's a couple of videos if you're interested. Watch the videos. If you're interested in a much longer presentation, I do 1 hour lunch and learns or workshops where we go into this with a lot more level of detail. 4 hour lunch and learns where we learn about the rest of the aspects, like how do we choose the idea once we get it? How do we make sure that we're prepared for our brainstorming session, or make sure that our subconscious mind is thinking about it? If we're in a meeting, we're trying to generate ideas with lots of people, how do we handle things like conflict? Because conflict happens in group meetings, right? How do we handle things like conflict? And then a bunch of tools. I gave you just 2 tools right now, level of specificity and SCAMPER, and there's a myriad of tools that I can use and that I can teach you on to help you generate new ideas. Creativity is much like if you're an accountant and you're using ledger paper, and then somebody gives you Microsoft Excel, you're a better accountant, right? Or they give you QuickBooks. It's much easier to do your accounting. There's tools that can make it so that your idea generation goes from like using ledger paper to using QuickBooks or Great Plains or whatever. So I can help teach you all those tools. Go to ideas.coach, watch the videos. If you're interested, shoot me an email, and I'll be glad to follow up and talk to you about however else you might want to learn about innovation and brainstorming and creativity.